Good morning. I'm Hassan Giordano, and this is your DMV Daily Dose for Thursday, October 10th, 2019.
Right now in Baltimore, it's 55 degrees Fahrenheit with mostly cloudy skies. Today's forecast has partly sunny weather, with a high of 73 degrees and a low of 55 degrees.
In sports, our neighboring Washington National Baseball team hit back-to-back homers off back-to-back pitches in the eighth inning and a go-ahead grand slam in the 10th to defeat the favorite Los Angeles Dodgers 7-3 last night and advance to the NL Championship Series, where they will face the St. Louis Cardinals, who demolished the Atlanta Braves after a 10-run first inning. Fox 45 had a town hall the other night that was supposed to be amongst the city officials and then between candidates running for mayor. But it wound up becoming a shouting match between angry audience members after Mayor Jack Young and Council President Brandon Scott didn't show up to the forum held at Coppin State University. Mayor Young's spokesman, Lester Davis, said that the mayor was never scheduled to attend, while Scott said he backed out at the last minute once it became clear that it wasn't what was sold to him by Sinclair broadcast employees. Sinclair officials state that they were upfront and honest with each participant and were never informed of their no-show, stating that at one point, Police Commissioner Michael Harrison and Baltimore City School CEO Dr. Sonia Santelides were confirmed but later also backed out, but reportedly informed Fox that they weren't coming, unlike Scott and Young. However, Young stated that he never confirmed and he didn't back out, he just didn't show up because he wasn't buying into what Fox was selling, period. Fox 45 is a station owned and operated by the conservative Sinclair Broadcasting Group and has gained the ire of leftist Democrats, parents, and education advocates here in the city of Baltimore who point to their regularly scheduled Project Baltimore investigative series into education across the city. While they're produced on an almost daily basis and have some hard-hitting stories surrounding the school system and issues with individual schools, they've also been alleged to have sensationalized some stories for the sake of headlines and views to the popular series hosted by Chris Papps. Maryland Matters is reporting on a story that should really concern local Baltimore City residents. In this article, we learned that a supermajority of the State Board of Elections voted on Tuesday to direct Montgomery County Board of Elections officials to bring them additional information about adding a 12th early voting site to the county in next year's elections, which will be presented to the State Board at their next meeting on October 31st. Now, this potential 12th site in White Oak, a lower-income, high-minority corner of the county that experienced long wait times at the polls in 2018, had been voted down along partisan lines by the Montgomery County Board of Elections last month. One argument for the additional early voting center is that it would cut down on the long election day lines. A half a dozen people came to Annapolis on Tuesday to testify in favor or against the local board's decision. Now, Montgomery County Board of Elections President James Shalleck, a Republican, said members of the county board have been concerned about the cost of creating a 12th early voting site, and said that the county is adding hundreds of new pieces of equipment to cut down on election day lines, particularly in the eastern part of the county. But since Maryland has a Republican governor, that means each local board of election has a majority of Republican members appointed to make such decisions, including in liberal strongholds like Montgomery County and right here in Baltimore City. But while Montgomery County has a chance of at least adding that additional site for the upcoming April 2020 primary elections, it appears as though Baltimore City doesn't, since the only person to raise the issue of Baltimore City voters who reside in Central West Baltimore to have an additional early voting site based on their lack of accessibility to such one is Senator Antonio Hayes. But unfortunately, nothing ever materialized from his concerns. According to the Maryland Matters article written by Danielle Gaines, the board also considered on Tuesday an appeal to add an additional early voting site in the city of Baltimore, though that proceeding lasted less than 15 minutes with fewer witnesses and actually no one showing up in favor of the additional site. No member of the state board made a motion to establish the 80 site, so the issue died for lack of support. Now, Armstead Jones, the city's election director, said that there were multiple proposals to change or add early voting sites in the city proposed this year. But the local elections board voted 5-0 last month to keep the 7 current early voting centers. Senator Antonio Hayes from Baltimore City's 40th District had proposed moving one site from the University of Maryland Baltimore Community Engagement Center over to Mondawmin Mall. But the board thought that proposal would cause too big a void in the middle of the city. Hayes also supported the idea of adding an 8th early voting site here in the city. And 12 of the 15 Baltimore City Council members introduced a resolution supporting that idea and the addition of that 8th early voting site in West Baltimore. Now, the resolution says that there is currently only one early voting place in West Baltimore, and a second was important to make it easier for residents to exercise their right to vote. Problem is, the public hearing on this resolution before the City Council's Judiciary Committee is scheduled for October 29th, which is one day before all counties across the state of Maryland have an October 30th deadline to present such proposals of early voting locations to the state board. So it appears the resolution, sponsored by City Council President Brandon Scott and Councilman Leon Pinkett, was merely for show and won't amount to much since it's too little, too late. Now, a side note, the 5 members of Baltimore City's Board of Election who voted unanimously last month not to add this new early voting location is currently made up of 3 Republican appointees and 2 Democrats, though you might as well say that they're all GOP appointed members, since the 2 Democratic members were actually not the choice of the Democratic State Central Committee, but rather were chosen by the Republican governor, Larry Hogan, over the 2 Democratic appointees just out of spite. Earlier this year, the Baltimore City State Democratic Central Committee chose Joe Richards and yours truly overwhelmingly to be their Democratic reps on the election board due to our vast knowledge of election law and years of community and election activism. However, the Hogan administration chose to choose the 2 lowest vote getters instead of the 2 highest vote getters, ensuring that the GOP had the final say over an election board that witnessed election fiascos take place in 2 of the last 3 primary elections, one of which had to be taken to federal court. It appears to me that the Democratic state senators should examine this move a little further when session reconvenes in January, since they do have the power of advising consent. I'm your man, Mr. Politics, and this has been your Daily Dose for Thursday, October 10th, 2019. And remember, the new promise begins with a new day. Therefore, the promise of tomorrow is greater than that of yesterday.